My name is Isabel Tran. I'm 26, a freelance designer in Brooklyn, scraping by with ramen packets and discount Metro cards. I never expected my life to change over a voicemail from a man I'd never met. Ms. Tran, this is Robert Langston, your grandmother's attorney. I'm calling in regard to the Tran Family Trust. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. It's important. I stared at the screen. Tran Family Trust. That was rich, no pun intended. Because if there was one thing my parents had made sure I believed growing up, it was that we were broke, that dreams were indulgent, that love was conditional, and that Grandma Min had nothing but her old sewing machine and boxes of musty books from Vietnam. I called the number back with trembling fingers, not knowing that I was about to inherit a truth my parents had buried for decades and a fortune they fought to hide from me. I grew up in the suburbs of Seattle in a beige 2-story home that looked like it had been bought on clearance. My mom, Linda, kept the windows spotless and the curtains tightly drawn. My dad, Henry, was an accountant with an ego bigger than his 2010 Lexus. And me, I was the invisible one. The one told to be grateful when handed secondhand jeans that still smelled like someone else's life. Our house was quiet in the most suffocating way, like everyone was holding in a scream. The only warmth I ever knew came from Grandma Min. She lived in a tiny cottage near Green Lake, her walls lined with oil paintings of ships and broken watches, and the smell of star anise and jasmine always in the air. Every Sunday, my mother dropped me off at Grandma's with the same phrase, "She needs to learn discipline." No more of that drawing nonsense. But Grandma would meet me at the door with arms wide and a mischievous twinkle in her eye. "Come in, Bayu," she'd say. "We'll make art today." Real art, not that polite stuff people hang to impress their dentist. I'd sit for hours sketching at her old kitchen table while she told me stories about Vietnam, about escaping war, about her late husband who had been a painter, turned businessman, turned ghost in our family memory. She spoke in metaphors that didn't make sense until years later. The most dangerous people, she once whispered while threading a needle, are the ones who smile while stealing. I didn't know then, but my parents were already digging graves, burying memories, truths, and me under the pretense of stability. High school was a blur of advanced placement classes and parental gaslighting. I remember once getting a 96 on an exam and my father saying, "So you missed 4 questions? That's 4 mistakes closer to failure." By senior year, I was sketching on the backs of grocery receipts, hiding my passion like it was contraband. When I mentioned art school, my mother didn't even raise her voice. She simply looked at me and said, "Not with our money, you won't." So I applied to Parsons behind their backs, got in, with a partial scholarship. When I told them, my father scoffed. "You want to starve in New York drawing pretty pictures for peanuts? You think we saved so you could live like a bohemian?" They didn't pay a cent. But someone did. Grandma Min. That was the first crack in the family's porcelain mask. And the first time I saw my mother's eyes not filled with boredom or control, but rage. Pure, cold rage. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she simply stopped speaking to her own mother. The next few years were a whirlwind. New York was brutal, brilliant, and everything I'd dreamed it would be. I couch surfed. I worked 3 jobs. I learned how to sketch between subway stops and cry in stairwells when freelance payments didn't come through. But every Sunday, like clockwork, I got a letter from Grandma Min. Real paper handwritten in her curvy Vietnamese English script. Sometimes she'd include pressed flowers. Other times, it was a folded $20 with a sticky note that read, "Buy something sweet. You deserve sweetness." When she passed last month, I was on a deadline and missed the funeral. My mother didn't even call me. I found out through a Facebook post by my cousin Tuan, the only cousin who ever liked my art. And then came the voicemail, the lawyer, the trust. I sat across from Robert Langston, a silver-haired man who looked like he'd stepped out of a courtroom drama. "Your grandmother created the Tran Family Trust in 1998, he explained, sliding a thick envelope toward me. "The amount now stands at just under $2.1 million. You are the sole beneficiary." I laughed, out loud. That has to be a mistake. My parents told me she had nothing. His eyes didn't flinch. "Your grandmother was the majority silent partner in a textiles import business. She sold her stake in 2005, very quietly. She lived modestly by choice. My heart was thudding. I opened the envelope and saw her handwriting again, one last letter. My sweet Isabel, I knew one day your parents would try to erase what is yours. This trust is not just money. It is your legacy. Use it with your heart, but guard it with your mind. There will be people who try to take it from you, some with kindness, some with blood. Be wise. Be bold. Love always, Ba Nguai. Tears blurred the words. And then came the sharp click of realization my parents had known. They had known, they lied, and they tried to bury me with the truth. What they didn't count on was that I had inherited something far more dangerous than money. Clarity. And I wasn't just going to let it go. When I left the law office, I didn't go home. I walked for hours, past cafes with glowing windows, past couples holding hands like promises, past old women hunched over bowls of soup who reminded me of her Min Tran, my grandmother, who lived modestly, not because she had to, but because she believed money revealed people faster than truth ever could. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I stood in front of my parents' house in Seattle with my fists clenched in my coat pockets. I hadn't visited since I left for Parsons 6 years ago. And yet, nothing had changed. The fake Tudor siding, the ceramic dragon on the porch, the lawn trimmed within an inch of its life. A shrine to appearances. My mother opened the door before I could knock. She stared at me like I was a package she didn't remember ordering. Well, look who remembered we exist. I stepped inside without answering. The air smelled like bleach and dried basil. My father sat on the couch in his usual pressed slacks, reading the financial section like it was scripture. He looked up, then back down. Here to borrow more money. That was the first lie of the morning, and I hadn't even said a word yet. I pulled out the envelope from Mr. Langston. My mother's face paled before I even opened it. She left it to me, I said. All of it. And I know you knew. My father blinked once. Excuse me? She had a business. You both told me she was poor, that she barely had savings. But she had over $2 million. And she left every cent to me. They said nothing. No denial, no outrage. Just silence, the kind that reveals more than shouting ever could. My mother finally stepped back, folding her arms tight across her chest. You don't understand what that money was meant for. I understand exactly what it was meant for. She trusted me with it. That trust was built on guilt, my father snapped. She manipulated you, filled your head with nonsense about art and passion instead of responsibility. That money was meant to support this family, your cousins, your future children. She didn't mention any of you in her will. My mother's mouth twisted into something bitter. You think she was a saint? Min always had her favorites. She never forgave us for putting boundaries on your foolishness. I could have laughed. Boundaries. They built a whole life of walls and called it parenting. I turned to leave, but something stopped me. A thought, a memory half-formed but sharp. Did you ever threaten her? I asked slowly. Or pressure her to sign something? The silence thickened. Don't be dramatic, my father said, but too quickly. She was senile toward the end, confused. No, she wasn't. She was precise, calculated. Grandma never did anything halfway. And suddenly I realized why my gut had been twisting since I left that law office. Because my grandmother didn't just quietly build a fortune and hand it to me out of nostalgia. She did it out of strategy. And someone in this house had tried to stop her. 2 days later, I met with Langston again. This time I came prepared. I had questions and I wasn't leaving until I had answers. Did she change her will recently, I asked. She made her final amendments about 6 months before her passing, he replied. Removed several names, added protective clauses. She even requested we assign a private investigator in case of contestation. I froze. She did what? Langston slid a thin folder across the desk. Your grandmother believed there might be interference from family members. We engaged a retired investigator named Marcus Geller to document anything suspicious. There are recordings, notes, surveillance footage from her care nurse's home. Would you like access? I didn't answer right away. Because my grandmother, sweet, stubborn, cookie-baking, art-loving Grandma Min, had orchestrated a posthumous sting operation against her own children. And suddenly, I wasn't just the girl who inherited money. I was the girl who inherited a war. Later that week, I tracked down Marcus Geller, the investigator. He met me at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill where he walked like someone who used to be dangerous and still remembered how. "She was sharp," he said, sipping black coffee. I liked her. When she told me her kids were acting strange, hiding mail, monitoring her phone calls, moving her medications around, I believed her. I swallowed. They did all that. They did worse. I caught your Uncle Danny, your father's brother, trying to access her bank account using forged papers. Your mother intercepted a letter she wrote you. There's a pattern. Isolation, manipulation, gaslighting. She never told me. She didn't want you to carry it. I felt heat rise in my chest. Rage. Not the loud kind, the slow, steady, bone-deep kind. The kind that waits. "Can you prove it?" I asked. He nodded. "Every tape. Every document. We have a full chain of evidence. It's admissible. She planned for this. She wanted you to choose what to do next." I didn't reply. I didn't trust myself to speak. Because suddenly this wasn't about inheritance anymore. It wasn't about money. It was about justice. And choice. I started making phone calls. First to Lauren, my college friend turned junior attorney at a boutique estate law firm in Manhattan. Then to Priya, a designer turned data analyst who owed me a favor from back when I helped her land her dream internship. And finally, to Ben, my ex, a freelance documentary editor who still hadn't deleted me from his contacts. Each of them said yes without hesitation. Maybe it was the story. Maybe it was pity. Or maybe just maybe they hated lies as much as I did. "What are we doing exactly?" Ben asked. "Building a timeline," I replied. "A visual map of every action they took, and we're going to publish it. Not as revenge, as exposure. Think they'll sue? I hope they do. Because the more I uncovered, the clearer it became." My parents weren't just greedy. They were architects of control. And they had done this before to my uncle's widow, to my older cousin Ethan, who mysteriously disappeared from the family Christmas list 10 years ago. There was a pattern, and I was going to burn it down. But first, I needed to go back. One last time. To the house where it all began. I texted my cousin Tuan, the only one I trusted. "Family dinner Friday night," he replied. "You should come. Mom's been asking about you." That was a lie. But I said yes anyway. Because the best place to stage a reveal is in a room full of liars who think they're still winning. I arrived 15 minutes early. Not because I was eager to see them, but because I wanted to watch. Observe the stage before the actors settled in. My cousin Tuan greeted me at the door with his usual crooked grin and a faint smell of pine from the candle burning inside. "They don't know you're coming," he whispered as he hugged me. And I figured that might be the best way. "Perfect," I replied. The Tran family dining room hadn't changed in over a decade. Still the same lacquered table, ornate as hell, and always a little too long for the number of people seated. Still the same gold-framed family portraits on the wall, though strangely none of them included Grandma Min. Her photos used to be everywhere, on the piano, in the hallway, even by the stairs. Now it was as if she had been erased. The woman who paid for this house, who built the foundation of the Tran legacy, vanished like a smudge on glass. I took the seat farthest from the head of the table and watched them arrive. Uncle Danny came first, carrying a bottle of wine he probably stole from his wife's client. He barely looked at me. Next came Aunt, my always overdressed and underwhelmed, her sharp eyes darting from person to person like she was counting potential enemies. Then came my parents. My mother didn't hide her expression. Disapproval tightened her mouth into a straight line, her arms folding automatically as if to block any emotion. My father didn't even speak. He just walked past me, dropped his coat on the chair beside mine, and poured himself a glass of wine as if nothing needed to be said. The tension was butter thick. Tuan cleared his throat. "Okay, so dinner's casual tonight, nothing fancy. We'll serve buffet style and eat here. No speeches." Everyone laughed a little too hard at that. We filled our plates with rice, roasted duck, sautéed greens, and that fish sauce chili paste combo that always reminded me of Sundays at Grandma's. I didn't eat much. I was waiting. Isabel, Aunt Mai said, finally breaking the silence. "You're still in New York." "I am. Still doing art." I smiled gently. "Still doing justice." That got a reaction. My mother blinked. My father finally looked at me. But I kept my tone light. Calm. My grandmother once told me that silence before the truth is the most dangerous part. It's when people think they still have control. I waited until the table was full, until plates were almost empty and wine had started to loosen everyone's tongues. Then I pulled out the folder from my coat and laid it flat on the table. "This is a copy of the investigator's file," I said, my voice clear but quiet. "Grandma hired him 6 months before she died. It documents everything. The attempts to access her accounts, the calls that were blocked, the mail that was hidden, the medication changes." Aunt Mai scoffed. "This is ridiculous." My father shifted in his seat. "This isn't the time or the place for theatrics." "No," I asked. "Because it's exactly the place, and the timing is perfect." I opened the folder and pulled out a single photo. It showed Uncle Danny entering a Chase Bank branch with a document bearing Grandma's forged signature. I slid it across the table like a poker chip. Then another, my mother removing letters from a manila envelope before handing the rest of the mail to Grandma's nurse. "She knew," I said. "She knew everything. And she left this paper trail for me to follow. This wasn't about paranoia. It was a test. To see who would cross the line when they thought no one was watching." Tuan stayed frozen, fork in hand. Uncle Danny laughed, but the sound cracked halfway through. "I don't know what you think this proves. It proves motive, pattern, behavior." My voice didn't rise, but the energy in the room shifted. This wasn't a tantrum. It was a reckoning. "And what do you plan to do with this?" my mother asked. Her voice sounded calm, but her hands betrayed her fingers tapping against her wine glass in uneven rhythm. "Legally, that depends. Ethically, I've already started." I pulled out a small USB drive and placed it next to the folder. "These are the recorded calls, and the full timeline I've compiled with help from an attorney, a researcher, and a documentarian. The story's already mapped out. If it goes public, it won't be just shameful, it'll be permanent." That got them. My father stood. "You're threatening your own family. I'm protecting what's left of her name. Something none of you had the courage to do." "She left you money," my mother said bitterly. "Isn't that enough?" "She didn't just leave me money. She left me responsibility. She trusted me to choose what to burn and what to rebuild." Silence fell again, this time heavier. And then from the other end of the table, Tuan spoke. "She helped me too, you know," he said quietly. "When I dropped out of med school, she didn't shame me. She gave me a loan to open my photography studio, told me not to tell anyone." My mother turned to him in disbelief. "She gave you money?" "She gave me faith," he corrected. "That matters more." And just like that, a crack split the room. The image of a unified, proper Vietnamese-American family began to fracture under the weight of suppressed truth. Because we all knew what Grandma had done in different ways. And now, one by one, the secrets were coming loose. "Here's what I'm offering," I said, pushing the USB drive forward. "I won't release this. Yet. But I'm starting a foundation in her name. Minh Tran Legacy Arts. For immigrant girls who are told their dreams are worthless. And every one of you is going to contribute." Uncle Danny scoffed. "You're extorting us." "No, I'm correcting a legacy." I stood. "I'll give you 2 weeks. After that, I'll assume you've made your decision. But just know this time you're not the only ones who get to decide what the Tran name means." As I walked out, no one followed. Not even Tuan. But I didn't need them to, because the power had shifted, and they felt it. Launching the Minh Tran Legacy Arts Foundation didn't feel victorious. It felt sacred, like carrying something fragile across a river filled with teeth. I didn't do it for headlines or sympathy. I did it because she asked me to. Not in words, but in intention. In the way she left every decision pointed in one direction toward the girl who had always believed in beauty, even when surrounded by silence. We filed the paperwork under a modest LLC. Lauren handled the legal structure, Priya ran projections on operating costs and outreach potential, and I designed the logo myself, a paper crane, mid-flight, half-folded, half-drawn, suspended in transformation. Just like her. We secured a tiny art space in Bushwick with peeling brick walls and a leaky radiator. It smelled like dust and paint thinner, which somehow made me feel right at home. Ben Ever, the brooding artist type, started filming behind-the-scenes footage for a mini-documentary saying, "This needs to be more than a website. It's a ripple." The day we announced the soft launch, online donations trickled in slowly at first. Then an alum from Parsons shared our post. Then an editor from a Vietnamese American magazine messaged me asking for an interview, and suddenly people started listening, talking, giving. That's when the sabotage began. At first it was small, a letter to the IRS questioning our nonprofit status. Then a concerned citizen complaint to the building inspector about improper permits. Then a phishing attempt on our donation platform, almost successful, except Priya caught it within hours. Each move felt random on the surface, but it didn't smell random. It smelled like fear, and someone who had something to lose. I called Marcus the investigator and asked him to dig again, not into the past, but into the present. He called me back 3 days later. "It's your mother," he said. Of course it was. She paid a man named Chris Way, a freelance fixer, to flag your foundation with every agency that might delay its momentum. He has connections in code enforcement, tax review, and a few ex-cops who still owe him favors. She's trying to bury it before it becomes visible. Exactly. I felt a wave of heat behind my eyes, but I didn't let it fall. I'd cried enough for that woman in my life. Now I was done offering her my water. "Can you prove it?" "We're already tracing the wire transfers. If she tries again, we'll be ready." I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat in the middle of the art space, legs crossed on the concrete floor, surrounded by blank canvases and old supply crates. I didn't speak. I just breathed. Because it wasn't just sabotage. It was desperation. My mother was trying to erase something she couldn't control. The irony wasn't lost on me. For decades, she'd tried to mold me into something silent, compliant, invisible. And now that I'd become something she couldn't predict, she panicked. But that's the thing about people who only know how to control. They think if they don't approve of it, it can't exist. 2 days later, Tuan called. "She's spinning it," he said quietly. "Spinning what?" "The foundation. She's telling the rest of the family you're exploiting Grandma's death for clout, that you're obsessed, that you're inventing drama for attention." I didn't respond right away. "Uncle Danny's repeating it too," he added. "Says if you keep pushing, they'll sue for defamation." I could almost hear my grandmother laugh. "Let them," I said. "It'll bring more press." But even as I said it, something in me felt bruised. Not from fear, from sadness. The kind that comes when you finally realize the people who raised you will never care enough to listen. They'll only shout louder to drown your truth. That night, I reread the last letter Grandma had written me, the one the lawyer had handed over that first day. I traced each word like it might still be warm. Then I noticed something. At the bottom corner of the page, barely visible unless you knew to look, was a tiny pressed symbol, not a signature. A marking, a seal. I'd seen it before, in a box in her old sewing room taped beneath a false bottom drawer. She used to tell me stories about her grandfather, a calligrapher and monk who would brand his letters with ink stamps made from carved wood. My heart pounded as I called Langston. She used a symbol, a seal, on her letter to me. "That wasn't standard, was it?" He paused. "A seal?" "Yes, a sort of family stamp. I don't recall any mention of that in the official documents, but there was something else." He rustled through papers, then murmured, "Ah, yes. There was a secondary envelope. She instructed us to give it to you only if the primary trust was challenged or sabotaged in any way." I went silent. "She suspected this might happen," I said. "She didn't just suspect it. She planned for it." He emailed me a scanned copy of the envelope. My name was handwritten in Vietnamese calligraphy across the front. Inside was a notarized declaration, a legal trigger clause. If any entity interfered with the execution of the foundation, additional assets stored under a different shell company would activate and shift under my control. Additional assets totaling another $600,000. My breath caught. She'd layered her legacy like armor, and she'd given me a sword I didn't even know I was holding. I forwarded the documents to Lauren. Within an hour, she'd drafted a public legal response, not an aggressive one, but a quiet shield. Just enough to let the family know if they pushed further, the fire would spread in their direction. I didn't want courtrooms. I didn't want public scandal. I just wanted distance. But sometimes the only way to gain distance is by standing still while the liars stumble back in shame. That week, something shifted. A woman named Hannah Vu, mid-40s, former nail technician turned muralist, walked into the foundation studio with a canvas rolled under her arm. She said she'd heard about our mission and wanted to help. The next day, 2 teenage sisters showed up with sketchbooks full of raw, brutal, beautiful imagery stories of growing up unseen in a country that only liked its immigrants when they stayed quiet. Then came 2 more, and more after that, and slowly the room began to fill, not just with color, but with truth, pain, reclamation. We hosted our first gallery night 2 weeks later. Ben edited the launch video. Tuan flew in from Seattle. Even Priya's sister brought homemade bonsai. It wasn't polished, but it pulsed with something that made people lean in. During my closing remarks, I looked out over the crowd, and suddenly I saw her. Not literally, but fully. My grandmother standing quietly at the back, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You did what I couldn't," she seemed to say. "You told the story I was never allowed to tell." I nodded to no one and walked off the stage. The gallery lights had barely cooled when the past came knocking. It was raining. One of those slow, deliberate drizzles that makes the world feel like it's holding its breath. I was sitting on the studio floor, surrounded by empty wine cups and leftover bonsai wrappers, quietly basking in the aftermath of our first real community night, when a soft knock sounded on the door. I thought it was Ben, maybe Tuan, someone I knew, someone safe. It wasn't. A man stood in the doorway, maybe late 60s, Vietnamese, sharp eyes that didn't blink enough. He wore a tan trench coat like a second skin and held something wrapped in red silk worn at the corners knotted precisely. "I'm looking for Isabel Tran," he said. "That's me." He nodded once, then stepped inside like someone used to being feared. Something about him was off, not dangerous, but heavy, like he carried rooms with him when he walked. "My name is Bin Lei," he said. "I knew your grandmother." I motioned for him to sit, but he stayed standing, placing the silk-wrapped object gently on the table like a relic. "She asked me to bring you this." After the gallery opened, she left instructions, written, specific. "What is it?" He didn't answer, just pushed the bundle toward me, then took a slow breath through his nose. "I don't know what's inside." I was just the courier, but she said it would explain everything she didn't have time to say. Then, without asking for water or warmth, he turned and left. I stared at the bundle. My hands hovered over the silk, afraid to unwrap it. Something inside me whispered, this isn't just history. It's a fracture. But I opened it anyway. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The photo showed a man I didn't recognize, Vietnamese, early 20s, standing beside a younger version of Grandma Min. She looked different. Not just younger, lighter. Her shoulders relaxed, her face unguarded. They stood in front of what looked like a sewing school. Behind them, a sign read, Saigon Women's Textile Collective, 1968. And then I saw the name written in ink on the back, Nguyen Can. My first son. I froze. First son. The letter was short, handwritten in her delicate, looping Vietnamese English addressed to me, and sealed with the same faint ink stamp I'd spotted before. It read, Isabel, you are the dream I carried inside my bones. But I need you to know, before there was your mother, before I ever stepped on American soil, there was another chapter. A boy, born in the shadow of war. I gave him to a French Vietnamese family who could offer him safety I could not. I told no one, not even Henry. His name is Khan, and if he finds you, listen. He may not ask for anything, but he deserves to be known. There is more to this legacy than money. There is truth, and it is time. Bang Wai. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. The room spun gently around me as questions collided in my throat. She had a son, before my mother, before any of this, and she never told a soul. The implications hit all at once. Somewhere out there, I had an uncle. Maybe cousins. Another branch of the tree, one that had been cut off quietly and buried deep beneath decades of silence. And now I was the one being asked to dig it up. But why now? Why not sooner? I called Langston. I need to ask you something strange. That's becoming your specialty. Did my grandmother ever mention another child from before? A pause. Then softly, she didn't name anyone. But she did mention regret. Deep regret. She once told me, there are roots I can't water anymore, but I hope one day they find the sun. My throat tightened. What does this mean for the trust, the foundation? Could he challenge it? Not legally, Langston replied. She established citizenship timelines and disclosures, but emotionally, that's your road to walk. I ended the call and sat still, because this wasn't just about logistics. It was about story. Grandma had chosen silence, and now she was asking me to break it or not. What would it mean to bring this man into the light? What if he didn't want to be found? Or worse, what if he did? I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the photo until dawn broke through the windows and spilled across the paint-smeared concrete. Ben stopped by mid-morning to drop off the first cut of the documentary. I barely heard his hello. He looked at the letter, then at me. You okay? She had a son, I said. He blinked. Wait, your mom has a brother. Half-brother. No one knew. Not even my grandfather, apparently. Jesus. I don't even know if he's alive. Or what he'd want, but she didn't ask me to find him. She said if he found me, I should listen. Ben leaned back, rubbing his jaw. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet. But if I'm building a legacy in her name, I can't do it while hiding the pieces she was too scared to claim. Later that week, Tuan called. Did you hear? Hear what? Your mom's trying to start her own arts initiative. Same mission, same language, even the same tagline. She's calling it Tran Cultural Heritage Collective. It's blatant. I laughed, not out of humor, out of disbelief. She's counterfeiting a legacy she never believed in. She's already reaching out to community sponsors, probably to dilute your reach. I hung up without responding, because something bigger had settled in my chest. Something quieter than rage, more dangerous than bitterness. Clarity. My mother didn't want to build anything. She wanted to erase me. Not out of hatred, but out of fear that her reflection was no longer the center of the family mirror. And I wasn't going to fight her anymore. I was going to make her irrelevant. I gathered my team. We don't respond, I said. We don't compete. We grow. And we focus on what she can't fake: authenticity. We launched the mentorship program 2 weeks early, rolled out our first podcast, started public art workshops in underserved schools in Queens. Every move we made was rooted in soil she couldn't touch, the kind built on lived experience, not strategy. And quietly, word spread. Because people know. They can feel it when something is real, when it bleeds. 2 days after the podcast aired, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a woman. Soft voice, hesitant Vietnamese accent. Are you Isabel Tran? Yes. I think. My father is your uncle. She said her name was Celine. Her voice trembled just enough to make me tread gently. My father is Khan. I found your name in an old notebook he kept tucked between immigration records and a faded photograph of your grandmother. I think he was waiting for the right moment. I didn't speak at first. Part of me still expected this to be a trap, a prank, or some opportunistic cousin trying to cut into the trust. But something about her voice, it felt real, measured, wounded in the way only truth can sound. We met 2 days later at a cafe in Flushing, halfway between her father's home in New Jersey and my studio in Brooklyn. She wore a navy coat, simple glasses, and held herself with a quiet intensity I recognized instantly. She was like me, raised on fragments, trained to hide her softness under structure. Celine reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. It was the same one I'd received. But this copy had handwriting I hadn't seen. Just one sentence scrawled along the white border. One day this will matter. My dad never fully understood why she left. She said, her tea untouched. He only knew that his birth mother was young, alone, and terrified. He grew up in Paris. His adoptive parents were kind but distant. They never spoke of Vietnam. He became a translator, then a teacher. He never came back, not until last year. And that's when he started looking. She nodded. He found her obituary. The article mentioned the foundation. Your name. And he sent you instead of coming himself. He's sick. Stage 4 lymphoma. I think he didn't want to burden you or be rejected. I swallowed that slowly. A man my uncle, born in war, abandoned for safety, never told the full truth of his origin, now dying quietly in another country. And somehow, through all that, he still chose to reach out. Does he want to meet? No, he wants to write. Just once. A letter. He says he owes that much. He doesn't want the money, Isabel, I promise you that. I believed her. Not just because of her voice, but because I'd felt that kind of humility before in my grandmother. It was the Tran signature, never ask for what you never expected to receive. I reached across the table and handed her a folded page I'd written the night before. A letter to him. I'd written it not knowing whether I'd ever send it, only that I needed to. It said simply, "Dear Kun, I don't blame you, and I don't feel owed, but I do believe truth makes room for new beginnings. If you ever want to see what she built and what I've tried to protect, my door is open. With respect, Isabel." Celine clutched it like something fragile. And for a moment, we just sat there, two strangers stitched together by one woman's impossible choices. In the weeks that followed, the foundation bloomed. We launched a residency program for young artists from refugee families, a gallery partnership in Berlin, a collaboration with a public library in San Jose. Everywhere I went, I carried the letter in my memory, the story in my chest. And quietly, I began receiving postcards. Not from Celine, from her father. Simple notes. One said, "She named you well." Another, "In another life, I think she would have been proud," out loud. And then the last one, weeks before the first snow, handwritten in strong cursive, "Isabel, I remember her eyes. Yours are sharper but just as tired. Tell your mother if you ever speak again that silence was never protection. It was shame. But you have none of that. Thank you for listening." Kun. I didn't cry when I read it. I just sat still, watching snow dust the sidewalk and let the quiet settle in like an old song. My mother, on the other hand, didn't stop fighting. Her imitation foundation fizzled within a month. Her emails to sponsors went unanswered. Her passive-aggressive holiday updates to extended family fell flat. Eventually, she tried calling me. I didn't block her. I let the phone ring until it stopped. Because I no longer needed her to admit anything. I'd already built the truth with my own hands. And truth doesn't need applause. It just needs room to stand. One evening, after our third artist showcase, I found Tuan cleaning up confetti in the hallway. He'd been with me through it all, quiet, backbone, hidden witness. "I think she'd be proud," he said, tossing an empty cup into the bin. "She'd correct my grammar first," I smirked. "Then maybe smile." He nodded, but she left it to the right one. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to say out loud. I wasn't just the inheritor of her wealth. I was her redemption, her unfinished sentence, her counterstory to the silence she had to live with. Weeks later, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a lacquer box. Carved, aged, beautiful. Taped to the lid was a note in French-accented Vietnamese. "She left this behind. Thought you might know what to do with it." Inside were 3 things. The original ink stamp, a faded fabric swatch embroidered with initials I couldn't quite place, and a tiny unfinished painting of a woman, neck arched, brush mid-stroke, eyes staring straight ahead. I mounted it in the studio's entryway. No label, no plaque, just presence. Every girl who entered saw it first. Every woman who left remembered it. A year later, we held our first National Summit, immigrant creatives, first-gen artists, refugee storytellers, all under one roof. Panels, performances, a mural across 3 walls. On closing night, I walked the halls and listened to the buzz, laughter, new connections, lives folding into each other. And I realized this was the real trust. Not the money, not the documents, not even the family name, but the space to begin again, the permission to rewrite, and the courage to remember. So if you ask me now, years later, who Isabel Tran is, I'll tell you she's not the girl her parents tried to forget. Not just the granddaughter of a woman who stitched worlds together in secret. Not just the founder of a movement or the name on a plaque. She is the result of 1,000 quiet betrayals turned into one loud promise. That what they tried to bury, I would raise. That what they left unspoken, I would name. And that no one, not blood, not legacy, not fear, gets to write the final chapter but me.
Story 2. My family blocked me from the group chat during my wedding. Then I came across pictures of them on vacation in Hawaii. Caption the families that are now complete. I only sent one message. While it lasts, enjoy it. I removed my name from the family business that day. The payroll account was frozen. My dad received a call from the Internal Revenue Service a week later. He knocked on my door for 20 minutes that night. When I opened it, it wasn't just that they weren't there that surprised me. They blocked me from the family group chat at that precise moment on my wedding day. I recall waiting outside the location immediately following the ceremony. Everyone was making their way to the reception hall as the sun was lowering and the sky had a gentle golden hue. Emma was laughing with her bridesmaids about the wind catching her veil. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. When I looked, I saw that it said, "You have been removed from Smith Family Core." I had assumed it was another congratulations message. No context, no warning, simply gone. As if it were written in a foreign language, I gazed at the screen. My initial thought was that it was an error. Perhaps Caleb accidentally tapped something. Perhaps Dad was trying to change the group photo or mute notifications because he was confused. That group chat has existed for 8 years. Birthdays and holidays, news about the family business. Everything passed through it. However, when I attempted to open it, nothing. I couldn't get in. At that point, I became aware that they were absent. Their table was empty of chairs. As a result, the chairs were arranged precisely. Mark, Caleb, Mom, and Dad are all empty. The waiters were constantly checking for tardiness. Alan, my closest friend, asked if they were stuck in traffic. I simply shrugged. I did not want to spoil the night. The fact that they had RSVP'd more than once made matters worse. They had filled out the online form, texted to confirm again the previous month, and even discussed their attire. My mother went to great lengths to avoid conflict with the bridesmaids. Mark invited his girlfriend to attend. Yes, I replied. They weren't merely anticipated. The damn plan included them. Before taking family pictures, the photographer kept asking if we wanted to wait for them. I continued to put it off. Eventually, we simply left them out. During dinner, Jody asked in a whisper if there had been any interaction between us. I told her I had no idea. That was the reality. I didn't receive a response until the 3rd day of our honeymoon. Before going to our cabin rental, we were in Napa only for a few tastings. I opened Instagram to see Emma selecting a bottle, merely by habit. Then they appeared standing on a Maui beach. They are all 4 smiling, holding cocktails, and wearing matching floral prints. Even his father, who never takes pictures, had Mark's arm around him. The caption said that the family was now complete. I merely sat there. No passion, no tantrum, simply empty. 2 asides. At first, she remained silent. Simply placed her hand over mine. I informed her that I had one item to send. From her phone, I launched WhatsApp. She typed one message while still in the group. "While it lasts, enjoy it." I opened my laptop after that. Smith wrote, "My dad wasn't the only one in logistics. I had been making it a reality for the past 6 years. I was the one who got us online, even though we were co-owners. Got the job at Walmart. Half of the logistics were automated. For transactions exceeding $10,000, I would configure the dual signature protocol. He had no idea how to use it. I deleted my name from the company registration after logging in. I put my shares in a holding pattern that resulted in their freezing. I also froze the payroll account, which is crucial. Withdrawals must be approved by me. That Friday was payroll due. I stayed out of the spotlight. Did not speak up. Let the quiet do the talking. I received a call from an unidentified number a week later. Didn't respond to Dad's CPA's voicemail. The IRS had apparently noticed some disparities. Missing paperwork and 2 years' worth of unpaid state taxes, and the amusing part, they couldn't have produced half of the necessary financial records without me. Before I even got to the front door that night, I heard the knocking. 20 minutes straight. I took a while to respond. I held him up. He was standing there when I opened the door, looking red-faced and sweating, as if he had been in hell. And what he said first, "What did you do?" For a few seconds, I allowed the silence to linger. He anticipated that I would recoil, defend myself, or perhaps even offer an apology. I simply waited while leaning against the doorframe. He moved forward, as if he were going to enter. I remained motionless. "The payroll was frozen by you. Are you aware of your actions?" I gave a nod. "Yes, I am fully aware of my actions." He would get somewhere if he continued to talk like that. Claimed that the drivers threatened to walk. That was already in the warehouse crew's possession. Penalties for missing deadlines were demanded by 2 clients. Claimed that because my credentials were linked to the online reporting, the accountant was unable to even file. the one thing he believed would shake me, was then dropped. This morning the IRS called. 5 years' worth of returns are being examined. 5. They believe we have been concealing our earnings. If this isn't fixed, we're all going to collapse. That word struck a different chord. We're all falling. I reminded him that the one guy they excluded from the family chat on his wedding day was not included in this. Apparently, that included everyone who could travel to Hawaii and pretend I didn't exist while grinning for the camera. He attempted to explain that it was simply a bad moment and that they needed space and that it wasn't personal. My wedding gave you the space you needed. That momentarily silenced him. He quickly changed to anger, claimed that I was being childish petty and discarding everything we had worked so hard to build. Then he took a folded piece of paper out of his jacket. After weighing it once, he threw it between us on the floor. I signed sheet the same document as 3 years ago, and it was a copy. I had forgotten a clause that was hidden in the early partnership filings. Under certain circumstances, it granted him some partial authority to override financial freezes. However, those requirements necessitated evidence of carelessness or deliberate injury. He was going to accuse me of undermining the business, that I did it maliciously. Even though he was bluffing, it was enough to keep the days that followed interesting. His attorney sent a cease and desist letter by Monday. I had responded to mine by Tuesday with a thorough audit of all the financial decisions I had made since joining, including the ones I had flagged over the years, all of which I had screenshots of, and several of which had verged on tax fraud. I kept most of it from Emma. Although she was aware of the outline, I spared her the anxiety. Before my family's chaos spilt into our new life, I wanted her to have at least a few days of peace after we returned from our honeymoon. For the first time in 2 months, Mom texted on Wednesday, "Could we please have a conversation? This is becoming unmanageable." No explanation, no apology. A tiny, delicate olive branch tossed like a discarded tissue. The situation changed by Thursday when the CPA began contacting me directly, even though I didn't reply. Stated quietly that the IRS was investigating more than just the company. They were investigating Caleb, a phony vendor, offshore accounts, and Dad's personal finances. The IRS wasn't merely snooping, they were hunting. And I still hadn't done a single thing. Emma and I were wrapping up our lunch when the call came in. For the first time since the wedding, we had been organizing thank you notes at the dinner table. Things seemed to be starting to calm down. My phone buzzed with an unknown number while we were making jokes about who had the worst handwriting. I took a step back and replied. Richard was the one, a CPA, the family business, and a man I had only spoken to twice in 6 years, and only when something was amiss. He wasted no time. "Listen, David, you should be aware of what's going on, even though I know you're no longer involved." He spoke in a sharp click. I didn't even inquire about how he obtained my number. I simply listened. As it happens, the payroll account did more than just bounce a few paychecks when I froze it. It interrupted a mid-transfer transaction that the bank's compliance team had flagged for audit. The account belonged to a shell company that purportedly maintained fleet software. However, that vendor was non-existent. The vendor's founding documents listed the address as a mailbox store in Nevada. Caleb. At that point, everything began to make sense. Why did Caleb always participate in the business in such a casual manner? Why he never had to describe his actual actions? "How bad is it?" I asked Richard. After a brief silence, he stated that the IRS had now referred the matter to a criminal investigator. They examined every transaction over the previous 5 years, not just one. My father had used my digital signature on a number of documents that I hadn't even seen, and it seems that my withdrawal had revealed the chain of irregularities. Fake invoices, inflated contracts, and unreported foreign income. I sat with it for a while after hanging up. I could have left at that moment, see them burn. However, I was still in charge of the backup server, which I had configured for complete financial transparency. It contained all of my emails, contract, invoices, and approvals, and nobody could access it without my password. I simply locked the system remotely. I didn't even need to remove anything. Emma asked if there was a problem when she noticed me working. I informed her that there was no point in trying to fix it at this time. I received a text from a Jody later that night. The IRS called again and said, "Your dad is in a spiral. Caleb hasn't had any sleep. Your mother is going crazy." It was not gratifying, not just yet. It seemed inevitable. Then I heard a knock at about 9 o'clock at night. Before I looked, I knew it was him. Dad was standing there. The same outfit as last week. His hair was unkempt, as if he had spent the entire day rubbing it through. I didn't have to invite him inside before he accepted. A thick envelope was just thrust into my chest. "Go through it. In all of this, you are not innocent. Right here." I remained at the door and slowly opened it. There were printed emails with excerpts of correspondence from 2 years ago between me and a logistics client. I recall that transaction, though, because my name was on the approval line of a big shipment contract. A standard delivery quote was approved by me. He was the one who later changed the invoice to conceal excess money and inflate the delivery cost. If the IRS sees those emails out of context, they won't just come after me, he said, leaning in. They will also pursue me. He believed that I would drop everything because I would be afraid. Unfreeze the accounts, log back in, and assist them in cleaning up the mess. Not even blinking. I wish you luck in that endeavor. I said, "You changed those figures." "Not me." His voice changed. After attempting to persuade me, he said that we could clean it up together if I returned right away. Claimed that they erred by skipping the wedding and that it is still a family business. However, we can get past that. He had never even brought it up before. And he believed that was sufficient. All of this would be resolved if he made a passing reference to leaving me on the most significant day of my life. I simply gave a headshake. "That bridge was destroyed by you. You're angry now. The fire is getting bigger." He remained motionless for an additional moment, as if he had something more to say. He turned and proceeded down the driveway after that. I locked the door after closing it. Not to be safe, to illustrate a point. Our former legal counsel sent me an email the following morning. It seems that my dad was attempting to raise liquid cash by selling company shares to a third party in a panic sale, but he was unsuccessful. Every significant asset still had my name attached to it, and the investigation was now as well. I anticipated repercussions, irate texts, threats, and perhaps even a last-ditch voicemail from my mother attempting to mend things. Hearing from someone I hadn't spoken to in more than 10 years was unexpected. I received an email on Friday morning from someone I hadn't seen since high school. My dad's estranged younger brother is Uncle Grant. When I was still in college, he had been forced out of the company. I was always told that he caused issues with the board and mismanaged funds. He sent a brief email. I heard what was going on. I waited for someone to notice it at last. "Meet me if you want the full picture. Everything is mine." At first, I didn't respond. I had no idea how to interpret it. Emma insisted that I go, stated that perhaps knowing what I was truly up against would be helpful at the very least. So I went to a diner 2 towns over and met him. He didn't appear resentful, but he did look older than I remembered, simply exhausted. Before our coffee had even arrived, he slid a manila folder across the table. Copies of old bank transfers emails, and one document in particular that made my stomach turn were all inside. It had to do with agreement, day-to-day 8 years ago with Uncle Grant's and my dad's signature. The rationale behind the acquisition: not poor management, silence, not failure. Uncle Grant had reportedly learnt that Dad and Caleb had been using surplus warehouse lease income to fund a side venture, a private shell company operating under Mom's name that purchased and sold commercial trucks at exorbitant prices, primarily to our own business. The scam was full circle, draining the company's resources while enriching themselves. Grant would disappear and never talk about it again after learning that it offered him a payout on one condition. He kept the documents in case something went wrong, but he accepted the deal. Now that the walls were closing in and the IRS was circling, he thought it was time for someone else to find out. I took it all, I scanned it, twice backed it up. I thanked him and walked away. The following day, I received a request from Smith and Rose's legal team to attend a mediation call immediately. They wanted to get everything settled as soon as possible, offer me a discreet buyout of all my shares in return for granting me access to the servers and locked accounts. I didn't pay attention to the message. That same afternoon, Emma came home with news of her own. While shopping downtown, she ran into one of the warehouse workers, Diego, a guy who'd been with the company since I joined. He told her something strange. Apparently, my dad had told the employees that I was the reason no one was getting paid, that I'd sabotaged the system. After a fight with my brothers, he was trying to turn them against me, said I was bitter and unstable. I didn't even get mad. I just laughed because by Sunday something happened that none of them expected. The IRS didn't just freeze the business accounts, they froze the personal ones too. My dad's, my mom's, and Caleb's, all pending formal investigation. No access, no transfers, no warnings. Emma and I were having dinner when I got the alert. All three of them were on a list of financial holds issued as part of the wider fraud probe. They were locked out of their money. Everything. I set my foot down, leaned back, and smiled. The house of cards wasn't just falling now. It had collapsed. Monday morning, I woke up to 33 missed calls, 9 from that 10 from Mom. The rest split between Mark and Caleb. Not a single voicemail, just silent panic. By noon, I had received 2 emails from the IRS requesting copies of the backup financial records, specifically the archived correspondence contracts and vendor activity that only I could access. I didn't respond yet. I wanted them to sweat. That evening, I got an unexpected knock. Emma checked the people first. It was my mother. I hadn't seen her since Christmas 2 years ago. She always preferred to play the quiet partner in family disasters, passive smiling, never directly responsible. But this time, she was the one standing on our doorstep, gripping her purse like it was the last stable thing in her life. She asked to come in. Emma left the room. We sat in silence for a few seconds, and then she launched into a rehearsed apology. She said she didn't know the full story, that she never agreed to skip the wedding, that Dad had convinced her it would be less tense if they just went away for the weekend. She insisted she tried to call. I told her she could have tried harder, told her I'd seen the group photo, the one with the caption about the family finally being whole. She shifted gears fast, said they were in trouble, that the IRS freeze meant they couldn't pay their mortgage, their credit cards, even their groceries. She said Dad was falling apart, that Caleb had a breakdown, and that the company would be destroyed if I didn't help with everything we had built over the years. She then said something that chilled me to the bone. "We are aware that there is an emergency fund." I went cold. Emma and I had arranged for that years ago. A different investment account that is in my name, bound by a trust, not even in the company's operations. We did not record it. Few people were aware of its existence. How I inquired. She paused. "It's possible that your father took some bank records from when you two had joint authority. He believes that funds ought to be reinvested in the company. Without the company, you would not have had it." She spoke as though it made sense, as if she thought it was true. I got to my feet. "I don't give a damn about his opinion. We own that money. On my wedding day, you all abandoned me. I owe you nothing," she pleaded, said the words literally. "Please." She then made one final attempt at a card. "Your dad is going to go public if you don't help. Let's say you planned this and manipulated the books," I chuckled. She winced. They wanted to drag me down with them as they were cornered and drowning. I assured her that I had no plans to halt the inquiry, that I was only holding off on sending the IRS the entire archive because I wanted to see how far they would go. After a moment of stunned silence, she walked away without saying anything more. I turned in all of the emails, backup files, transaction logs, and Uncle Grant's paperwork the following morning. After shutting down the laptop, I took Emma to brunch. Allow them to burn. The investigation officially began 3 days after I sent the archive to the IRS. I was informed that it made the news by Emma. Due to years of tax evasion, a family-owned goods company is currently under federal audit. No names were given, but anyone in the area who knew the Smiths could figure it out. Friends began sending each other texts. Some of my former coworkers contacted me, some in disbelief, some simply to say they always sensed something wasn't right. My father sent me the last message I had ever read that evening. It was a screen grab of a court document written by his lawyer, in which he accused me of violating a fiduciary duty, causing harm to the business, and putting the whole family under financial and emotional strain. He threatened to file a civil lawsuit if I didn't remove the documents. The number was blocked by me, without hesitation. I then deleted my name email profile and everything else, after logging into the company portal, which was one of the few things that was still operational. Not in retaliation, not with malice, merely because the moment had come. A few hours later, Mark attempted to call. This time he left a voicemail, claimed that I had overreached, claimed that I ought to have dealt with this within the family. I misunderstood the situation, and we could have had a conversation, according to a paragraph that Caleb sent me via email. It's funny. On my wedding day, nobody wanted to talk. All of them failed to appear, not a single message. However, they discovered their voices when their house was being audited, and their accounts were frozen. I didn't respond. They all made decisions. I broke off all communication. I wasn't spiteful when I blocked them. I simply didn't want their poison to continue seeping into the things Emma and I had created. 3 months later, we relocated out of state. The town is clean now. The emergency fund was left unaltered. I resumed private consultations. Emma returned to her teaching. Jody and a few other family members kept in touch, and our life became calm, steady, and genuine. When we got together for dinner, some of our wedding friends would still bring it up. How my family did something that no one could believe. How foolish it was to put a vacation ahead of the wedding of their own son. They only care about control, and when they lose it, they lose everything according to the consensus of all. It has now been almost a year. I still occasionally receive unsolicited letters from law firms or distant cousins who are trying to catch up. I disregard them. I have a new rhythm and a new home with Emma. Now we discuss children. We take trips when we feel like it. I never imagined that we would laugh as much as we do. I have lost my anger. Just finished. I occasionally tell the truth when someone asks if I miss them. I miss the person I believed them to be. However, that version never appeared. Not when it was important. And I won't now either. 6 days after I had assumed that everything was behind me, I received an email that completely stopped me cold. It wasn't a notice. It was from the IRS, not a request. I'm grateful. In a formal statement, one of the case's senior agents acknowledged the importance of the information I supplied. I didn't anticipate it. It stated that several offshore accounts connected to fraudulent vendor payments, not just in my dad's name, had been found as a result of the backup records I submitted. Other colleagues were present, a few of whose names I knew from previous business gatherings. The email ended with something unexpected, even though 2 of them had already left the country. Based on the records, we will be sending out a subpoena for testimony. Although we think you were not aware of these activities, your cooperation could help us develop the case more broadly. That line caught my attention twice. My dad was no longer the only focus of this. This was larger. Emma discovered something in the mail later that afternoon. A heavy envelope. It was delivered by hand, but there was no return address. No label, no stamp. There were 2 items inside, a flash drive and a letter from Caleb. His letter was apologetic rambling and at times desperate. He claimed that Dad had lost his mind, that he was attempting to place the blame on anyone he could, and that he had coerced Caleb into creating the phony vendor accounts, about which Mom knew more than she admitted, but kept quiet out of fear of losing everything. He apologized for what transpired at the wedding and stated that he didn't want to go down with them. He was aware that I would never forgive him. However, I might eventually come to understand if the flash drive helped to balance things out. I connected it to a disposable laptop. It contained spreadsheets, voice memos, internal emails, and even a few videos. In one of them, the father was laughing while speaking with someone in another country about how the child signs everything I put in front of him. I was that person. Another showed him describing to Caleb how to avoid banking thresholds by dividing vendor payments into smaller batches. It was sealed. I sent a brief message with all of this information to the IRS contact. Another present. Emma and I sat on the porch that evening. We said very little. Just observed the rolling breeze and the darkening sky. And I came to a realization. This was no longer retaliation. It was taking something away. A last cleaning out of everything that attempted to ruin what ought to have been my greatest day ever. Into a betrayed memory. It was just over now. And for good this time.